Shalom, shalom. This week's Parsha is Parshat Chukat, a fascinating Parsha at that. And most people, when they talk about this Parsha, focus in on certain topics like the Paraduma, the red heifer, or the death of Miriam, or the sin of Moshe and Aaron, where God told them, after the Jews complained they had no water, to speak to the rock, and they hit the rock, and they were severely punished to not be able to enter the land. Or the death of Aaron. There's so many things to talk about in this week's Parsha that really get a lot of attention. And so other very important details get overlooked. So I want to take a minute to talk about one of these overlooked details that I find very fascinating and I think is important to take a look at. So, okay, after the Moshe and Aaron hit the rock and God told them that you're not going to enter the land because you didn't sanctify my name, the Jews are going to continue on, the Israelites are going to continue on their way to try and enter the land of Israel. And so they're sitting at the border at this place called Kadesh that borders with Edom. Now Edom, this nation, we have to understand the story, is the descendant of Esau, okay? And the Israelites are the descendant of Israel, who is Yaakov. Story of Esau and Yaakov, right? Now, they want to pass through their land to get to Israel. And so Moshe sends a messenger to say, gives them a little bit of a synopsis and says, listen, our forefathers, they went down to Egypt, they suffered, they were, enslaved and had a very difficult time, and they cried out to God, and God heard their cry, and he sent them an emissary to take us out of the land of Egypt, and they need to get to Israel, and can we please pass through your land? That's all they want to do, to pass through the land. They said they'll stay on the King's Road, they're not going to make much of a deal, they're just going to go straight through, no trouble. And the king of Edom says, no, you will not pass through me. Okay, very interesting. They said, can we pass by, the question they said, can we pass through your border? And he says, no, you will not pass through me. Okay, interesting, take that note. And then they said, listen, we're going to go on the highway, and if we drink your water, if we do anything, we will pay. It'll be lucrative for you, as we're trying to say, and we won't make a mess. We're just going to go through. And still, the king of Edom, it says, Vayima'in, he refused to let them go, and he shows up with a mighty hand, and the Jews have to turn away and go a different way. Okay, now this is a fascinating story for reasons that have to do with the history of Yaakov and Esau. Now, I think that if you look at the words, they're hinting at us. They asked to pass through the border, and he said, you're not going to pass through me. It was something that was personal for the king of Edom. So what's so personal? Let's remember way back when Yaakov was making his way after being in the house of Laban, and he's making his way and he's going to meet, it's reminiscent, he's going to meet with his brother Esau, right? Like the Jews are about the Israelites are about to meet with Edom. And what did Yaakov do? He also sent messengers, and the messengers came back and said, Esau's already coming your way, and with like 400 men. And Yaakov was so scared, and he made this three-pronged approach of dividing up his camp, of sending lots of gifts. He bowed down to him. He prayed to God. He did all sorts of things. That was his second line of defense. And finally, when Esau is coming his way, he keeps sending gifts and bowing down and trying to appease him. And then finally, when they come face to face, Esau seems to have been softened. And he even says, let's go together. Walk with me, my brother, he says. And Yaakov says, no, I can't go with you, but, we're too weak, we're too soft. We have to go really slowly. You go on your way to Mount Seir, which is now where they're meeting up, okay? You go on your way back there, and we'll meet up with you one day. But Yaakov never met up on Har Seir with Edom that day. This brotherly connection that was seriously hurt from past injuries, there was an opportune moment, I think, and it wasn't it wasn't taken up upon, but there was a promise for the future, a promise for some time in the future. Now, perhaps this was a moment in the future where they had to kind of rectify this relationship between the nations, the descendants of both kinds. And the reason why I say this is not something that I make up. God instructs Israel not to start up with them, not to fight with them. God tells him in the Torah that he is your brother. I've given him this land, and you're not to wage war with them. God wanted them to get along. They should have had good diplomatic relations. And when Moshe sent the emissary and they weren't successful, and they made it all about like, don't worry, we won't hurt you, we'll pay you. I think that this king of Edom says, they said, we'll pass by your border. He said, you won't pass through me. I think there was a national pride and hurt of, you're calling me your brother and you're talking like that, but yet you say all you want to do is use me to just pass by me. Like, no, you don't see any of the things that Yaakov did, by like trying to, appease them by like, bringing gifts or doing something or saying, let's work together and make it more about a relationship and a way that they can work together and live side by side peacefully. And they didn't take that opportunity to do that. And when it says the king of Edom refused, he uses the word vayima'en. This word vayima'en only appears 3 other times in Bereshit if you look at it. And where does it come? The first time it comes is when the brothers came to tell Yaakov that it appears Yosef's been ripped apart and eaten and killed by wild animals. They brought him the bloody coat, and it says that Yaakov, he refused to believe this. There was something visceral. There was something in him that said he couldn't accept it, because he had a vision of something in the future, something about the brothers, all of the brothers uniting and being one, which was his vision. And we see that at the end of his life, in order to appease him, all the brothers come together and say, the Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Don't worry, Yaakov. We're fulfilling this vision of yours. That's the vision he wanted. So he couldn't accept. He knew that this was something that was to be. So he refused to accept it. Now we see it again with Yosef when he refused Potiphar's wife's advances. Now, Yosef was a young, good-looking man, and there was this woman all over him in the years where his hormones were bursting, and it would have been very easy for him to give in to this, and nobody could know, and he could just have his way. But he had a vision again of his future, of coming back together with his brothers, and of fulfilling a vision for the future. And so therefore, Vayima'en, he refused something that was going to possibly impact the future vision, because he kept it in mind. And the last time that we see it is again with Yaakov, when it says that Vayima'en, when Yosef brought Ephraim and Manasseh to be blessed to Yaakov, and Yaakov had put apparently the wrong hands left and right on the younger and the older, and he was going to give the blessing for the older to the younger. And Yosef said, you can't do that, Dad. Like, that's not what's meant to be. And it says, Yaakov Vayima'en, he refused to change his hands. Again, for his vision of the future, this vision of the younger and the older, and how it's going to work out, and how it's going to be best for the nation, the Israelite nation. And we're told that Ephraim and Manasseh had this very, very special relationship, that it didn't even bother Manasseh that Ephraim got the bracha, the blessing that was meant for him, because of that special love, and that this was something that was necessary in order to attain the future goal. Now, so this word Vayima'en is a refusal based on something that they want for the future. So they're refusing to do something now because they have a vision of the future. And this is what it's using for Edom when it says, you cannot pass by, you can't pass through me. First of all, it's indicating that he's hurt. You're just going to pass through me, you're going to trample all over me. Where's our relationship? Where's the repair? Where's the meeting me up on Har Seir that you promised me? There's like a vision he had that Yaakov promised that wasn't coming to fruition, and I feel that there was a hurt there. There was a hurt, and they didn't understand that. They didn't acknowledge that we didn't take that lesson from our past and take this opportunity to work on that and to have diplomatic relations with our brother who God calls, who's going to be living side by side, and you need to have those good relations. And I don't think that, my assessment is that we did it in a way that they could hear us and that we could establish that relationship. And look, I don't think we're blamed for it, because we don't see any we don't see like that God says anything. But what we do see after that is, right after that, we learn about the death of Aaron. Why is the placement of the death of Aaron right after in this story? And I think that also shows us, because Aaron, what he represented is having brothers get along. Aaron and Moshe, the relationship par excellence of brothers that worked with each other to make something happen. And that was his job as the Kohen Gadol, and that was his job for the people. And if at this point, all those years in the desert with him being the leader, they couldn't have done that successfully. It was like the metaphorical death of Aaron, everything believed in, of establishing those relationships. And I think that's a lesson here, that there's a death, not just the physical death that we had of Aaron, but of this idea of this idealized brother and brother making it work. And I think this is really important for us, because we're at the end of days where we need to make things work, where we can't have this navel gazing and only be about ourselves like we did at that point in the desert, where we were just thinking about ourselves and getting to our end game and not thinking about the other nation and how it's appearing. We're just asking for what we needed. You can't just ask for what you need. You have to take in consideration the other. And now that we're at this point, and thank God we have this gorgeous country, and we have countries that surround us, countries that we're dealing with, and it says in all of our literature that we're going to meet up at Har Seir, and this is part of the prophecy. But we have to understand that it's not just about us and our future. It's about this world vision of all the countries living successfully with good relations with one another and making the world work in harmony. Shabbat Shalom.